It started as a routine flight for everyone on board, until one shocking moment turned the entire day upside down. A confident and successful black woman walked onto the plane, excited for her journey. But little did she know, her presence would ignite an unbelievable series of events. The pilot, a man trusted with lives and responsibilities, shockingly refused to fly her. His actions, laced with prejudice, left the passengers stunned and her in disbelief. As whispers spread through the cabin, tension rose and emotions ran high. But just when it seemed like injustice would prevail, her husband stepped in. Calm, determined, and armed with more than just words, he made sure this pilot faced the consequences of his actions. What happened next left everyone speechless and changed the pilot's life forever. Stay tuned to see how this extraordinary moment unfolded and why he instantly regretted his decision. It started as a routine flight for everyone on board, until one shocking moment turned the entire day upside down. A confident and successful black woman stepped onto the plane, excited for her journey. But little did she know, her presence would ignite an unbelievable chain of events. The pilot, a man trusted with lives and responsibilities, did the unthinkable. He refused to fly her. His actions, rooted in prejudice, left passengers stunned and her in utter disbelief. Whispers rippled through the cabin as tension escalated, creating an air of uncertainty and unease. Just when it seemed injustice might win, her husband intervened. Calm but resolute, he confronted the situation with unshakable determination. What followed not only held the pilot accountable, but left everyone witnessing it in complete awe. This is a story of courage, justice, and an unforgettable lesson learned the hard way. Stay tuned for the full story. The cabin fell silent as the pilot's shocking decision echoed through the plane. The black woman, calm yet visibly shaken, stood in disbelief. Passengers exchanged confused and worried glances, some whispering their thoughts, while others stared at the unfolding scene. The flight attendants, caught between protocol and the uncomfortable reality of the situation, hesitated to intervene. Her husband, seated a few rows behind, quickly realized something was wrong. Rising from his seat, he approached with a firm but measured tone. "What seems to be the problem here?" he asked, his voice cutting through the tense atmosphere. The pilot, defensive and unwilling to admit his bias, muttered something about passenger safety that didn't add up. The woman's husband wasn't buying it. Other passengers began to murmur louder, some voicing their support for the couple. The situation grew increasingly intense as the pilot dug himself deeper into his excuses. Meanwhile, the woman's husband calmly but firmly demanded answers, refusing to back down. His presence and composure inspired others to speak up, adding to the pressure on the pilot. As the tension mounted, a flight attendant discreetly contacted the airline's ground staff, sensing the gravity of the situation. The passengers now watched closely, feeling they were part of something bigger, a stand against blatant injustice. Still, the resolution felt far from sight, and the question hung heavily in the air: what would happen next? The situation on the plane escalated as the pilot, now visibly cornered, refused to acknowledge any wrongdoing. Passengers began voicing their frustration, some even demanding the airline replace the pilot before the flight continued. The woman's husband, unwavering in his resolve, spoke firmly but respectfully. "Your actions are not only unjust but a violation of basic decency. This won't go unnoticed." Tension thickened as the airline's ground staff arrived on the scene. A supervisor boarded the plane, her expression serious as she assessed the situation. The pilot attempted to explain himself, but his words lacked conviction, faltering under the mounting pressure. Passengers leaned in, listening intently to every word. Some began recording the interaction, determined to capture the truth. The woman, holding her husband's hand, remained composed, though her eyes revealed the hurt she felt. Her calm strength resonated with those around her, sparking a ripple of solidarity. The supervisor, now addressing the couple, promised to investigate thoroughly, but the atmosphere was far from settled. As the confrontation reached its peak, the question loomed: would justice prevail, or would prejudice go unchecked? The passengers, the couple, and even the flight crew waited anxiously for the next move, the weight of the moment hanging heavily in the air. Just as it seemed the situation couldn't get any more intense, a second, unexpected twist unfolded. A fellow passenger, a quiet older gentleman seated a few rows back, stood up and made his way forward. The man introduced himself as a retired airline pilot, someone with years of experience in the industry. With a calm yet authoritative tone, he addressed the supervisor and the current pilot directly. "I've flown countless flights, and I've never seen such behavior. This is not just unethical, it's a violation of professional conduct." The passengers collectively held their breath, shocked by this unexpected turn. The retired pilot continued, questioning the current pilot's ability to lead safely given the clear bias he had demonstrated. His words carried weight, and for the first time, the pilot seemed genuinely rattled. The supervisor, now caught between mounting passenger support for the couple and the retired pilot's standing statement, signaled for a brief private discussion outside the plane. As they stepped away, the cabin buzzed with whispers. The tension was palpable, and passengers speculated about what might happen next. The woman's husband, still standing beside her, looked around and saw the growing support from everyone on board. It was clear that this incident had sparked something much bigger than anyone anticipated. The doors to the cockpit remained closed, and the airline staff seemed to be in an intense debate just outside the cabin. Passengers leaned forward, watching and waiting, wondering if this dramatic confrontation would finally lead to accountability, or if the bias would somehow prevail despite the overwhelming evidence against it. The stakes were higher than ever, and everyone felt the weight of the moment as the story surged toward an unforgettable climax. After what felt like an eternity, the supervisor returned to the cabin, her expression unreadable. The pilot followed closely behind, looking visibly uneasy. All eyes were on them as the supervisor took a deep breath and addressed the passengers. She apologized for the delay and reassured everyone that the airline took the incident seriously. Then, in a firm but composed voice, she announced that the pilot would no longer be operating this flight. A wave of murmurs swept through the cabin, a mix of relief and approval. The passengers who had rallied around the couple exchanged supportive glances, knowing they had played a role in standing up for what was right. The woman's husband thanked the supervisor, but before he could sit down, the retired pilot stepped forward again, his voice calm but commanding. "There's something else everyone needs to know," he said, holding up a document he had retrieved from his bag. "I've seen this pilot's name before. He was flagged for inappropriate conduct in a professional review years ago, but was allowed to continue flying. This incident isn't just a one-off, it's part of a pattern." The cabin fell silent, the weight of his words sinking in. The supervisor's face stiffened as she took the document and skimmed through it. It was clear she hadn't anticipated this twist. She turned to the crew and assured everyone that the airline would investigate further and ensure full accountability. A replacement pilot was called in, and the flight finally resumed. As the plane soared into the sky, the woman and her husband sat hand in hand, surrounded by passengers who had become unlikely allies in their fight for justice. The unexpected twist about the pilot's past lingered in everyone's minds, a stark reminder of how deeply rooted biases could persist if left unchecked. In the end, justice prevailed, but the experience left an indelible mark on everyone involved, reminding them that courage and solidarity could spark change in even the most unexpected places. Inside the coffee shop, as Karen stormed out, the atmosphere began to shift. Customers who had been watching the spectacle now exchanged amused glances, some whispering about the dramatic exit. The barista, who had handled the chaos with grace, turned back to the counter, ready to serve the next customer. But before the next order could be taken, a group of regulars approached, holding out a makeshift tip jar they had quickly passed around. "This is for you," one of them said with a smile. "You handled that like a pro." The barista's face lit up with gratitude as the crowd erupted in a small round of applause. turning what had been a stressful moment into something unexpectedly heartwarming. Meanwhile, outside, Karen paced furiously in the parking lot, her phone glued to her ear as she tried to rant to whoever would listen. Her tirade was cut short when she noticed something on her car windshield, a handwritten note. Snatching it up, she read it aloud, her voice dripping with disbelief. "Thanks for parking like you own the place. Your tow is on the house." Her face turned beet red as she realized a tow truck was already lifting her car. A crowd began to gather near the window, stifling laughter as they watched the scene unfold. Karen ran toward the tow truck, gesturing wildly, trying to stop what was already in motion. The driver, unfazed, calmly pointed to the parking lot rules posted nearby. Before Karen could argue further, a police officer arrived, responding to multiple complaints about her obstructing traffic. She attempted to explain, but the officer, maintaining a professional demeanor, handed her a citation for her violations. As Karen's car was hauled away, her frustration spilled over, but it was clear she was out of options. For the onlookers, it was a satisfying conclusion, a moment of karmic justice that felt both surreal and deserved. Phones captured every second, ensuring the tale would live on long after Karen's protests had faded into the distance. For everyone else, it was a morning they wouldn't soon forget, proof that respect and accountability always win in the end.